Dr. Marcus Kane moved through the white corridors of the HMS Mercy with practiced steps. The hospital ship hummed quietly through space, its red cross markings visible on every surface. For 3 years, the war between humans and the Zephyrian Empire had raged across the galaxy, but here in the medical bays, that war felt distant. Kane stopped beside bed 47, where a young Zephyrian soldier lay unconscious. The alien's blue-tinted skin showed signs of healing from laser burns across his chest. Kane checked the monitors and adjusted the pain medication. It did not matter to him that this being belonged to the enemy forces. The oath he had taken demanded he heal all who came to him. "Dr. Kane, we have incoming wounded from the Delta 7 battle," said Nurse Betty Clark as she approached with a datapad. 12 human soldiers and 6 Zephyrian prisoners. Kane nodded and walked toward the trauma bay. Commander Lisa Park stood near the main view screen watching the stars. She turned as Kane passed. "Any word from the Fleet Command about our next destination?" she asked. "We go where the wounded are," Kane replied. "That is our only mission." The HMS Mercy carried over 2,000 souls. Most were medical staff and patients, but also refugees from destroyed colonies and prisoners of war from both sides. The ship's massive size allowed it to serve as a floating hospital, moving between battle zones to collect the injured and dying. Captain John Hayes announced over the ship's communication system that they would reach the Kepler station in 6 hours. The station had requested medical aid after a Zephyrian raid left hundreds wounded. Kane knew they would work without rest once they arrived. In Surgery Bay 3, Dr. Amy Ross worked on a human pilot whose ship had been shot down over New Mars. She looked up as Kane entered. "This one will make it," she said with a tired smile, "but he will need months of recovery." Kane and Amy had worked together for 5 years. She understood his dedication to healing even enemy soldiers. Many other humans could not accept this, but Amy always supported his choices. She believed that showing mercy made them better than their enemies. The day shift continued with routine medical care. Kane treated a Zephyrian child who had been injured when her transport was caught in crossfire. The little girl's parents had died in the attack, and she now traveled as a refugee aboard the Mercy. Kane gently bandaged her arm while she stared at him with large, frightened eyes. "Will it hurt forever?" she asked in broken human speech. "No," Kane said softly. "The pain will go away, and you will heal." Commander Park received a message from Terran Command as evening approached. The Mercy was ordered to maintain its current course and continue providing medical aid to all sides. The Federation still respected the ancient laws of war that protected hospital ships. Kane ate dinner with Amy in the small cafeteria reserved for senior staff. They talked about their patients and the new medical techniques they had developed during the war. Amy mentioned that the Zephyrian prisoners seemed grateful for the care they received. "They probably never expected humans to treat them well," Amy said. "Maybe when this war ends, they will remember our kindness." Kane hoped she was right. He believed that healing could build bridges between species, even in the middle of a war. The Mercy represented the best of humanity's nature, showing compassion, even to those who fought against them. As night shift began, Kane made his final rounds through the medical bays. The ship felt peaceful with most patients sleeping. Emergency lights cast a soft glow in the corridors. Kane checked on the Zephyrian child, who slept peacefully for the first time since arriving. He returned to his quarters and reviewed medical reports on his personal computer. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and more wounded souls who needed help. Kane felt tired but satisfied with the day's work. Every life they saved mattered, regardless of species or allegiance. The HMS Mercy continued through space, its red cross symbols clearly visible to any ship that might encounter it. The vessel broadcast on emergency medical frequencies, identifying itself as a protected hospital ship under galactic law. Kane fell asleep believing that even in war, some things remained sacred. Unknown to anyone aboard the Mercy, 3 Zephyrian battle cruisers had been tracking their movements for 2 days. War Marshal Thosvar had given specific orders about the human hospital ship. He believed that destroying it would break human morale and show that the Zephyrians respected no treaties or laws. The attack would come at dawn, when most of the medical staff would be changing shifts. Kane would wake to find his world of healing, transformed into a nightmare of fire and death. The gentle doctor who saved lives would soon discover what it meant to lose everything he held sacred. The explosion threw Kane from his bed as the HMS Mercy shuddered under enemy fire. Emergency alarms screamed through the corridors, while red lights flashed in the darkness. Kane pulled himself up, his left arm hanging at an odd angle, clearly broken. Blood ran down his face from a deep cut on his forehead. Another blast rocked the ship, and Kane heard the horrible sound of metal tearing apart. He stumbled toward his door, but it would not open. The ship's power systems were failing, and gravity fluctuated wildly. Kane used his good arm to force the door open manually. The corridor outside was chaos. Smoke filled the air, and sparks shot from damaged electrical systems. Kane could hear screaming from the medical bays. He ran toward the trauma center, ignoring the pain in his broken arm. The ship tilted suddenly as another explosion hit the engine section. Kane reached Medical Bay 7 and found hell waiting for him. The roof had collapsed, crushing several beds with patients still in them. A fire burned near the medicine storage area. Nurse Betty Clark lay unconscious near the door, her leg twisted beneath a fallen beam. "Help me!" called a voice from the wreckage. Kane climbed over debris to find Dr. Amy Ross trapped under a heavy piece of ceiling. Her face was pale, and blood pooled beneath her body. "Amy, hold on," Kane said, trying to lift the metal beam, but with only one working arm, he could not move it. "I will get help." "Marcus," Amy whispered, her voice growing weak. "The children's ward. Please check on them." Kane promised he would, but when he looked back at Amy's face, her eyes had closed forever. His closest friend and colleague was gone. Kane knelt beside her body for a moment, feeling something cold and hard settle in his chest. The ship's communication system crackled to life. Captain Hayes's voice echoed through the dying vessel. "All hands abandon ship. This is not a drill. Repeat, abandon ship immediately." Kane forced himself to move. He had to reach the children's medical ward on deck 12. The ship groaned and twisted as he climbed through damaged corridors. In some areas, the hull had been breached, and Kane could see stars through the holes. The Zephyrian battle cruisers hung in space nearby, their weapons still firing at the defenseless hospital ship. The children's ward was destroyed. Kane found only bodies among the scattered toys and medical equipment. The Zephyrian child he had treated the day before lay still in her bed, killed by falling debris. Kane checked for survivors but found none. 18 children had died here, along with their caregivers. Kane made his way to the escape pods, helping other survivors when he could. The ship was breaking apart, and they had little time left. He found Commander Park trying to get wounded personnel into the few remaining pods. "Dr. Kane," she called out, "get in pod 7. We launch in 30 seconds. Kane climbed into the cramped escape pod with 6 other survivors. As they launched away from the dying ship, Kane watched through the small window as the HMS Mercy exploded in a brilliant flash of light. 3 years of dedicated medical service ended in moments. The escape pod drifted in space for 8 hours before a Terran patrol ship found them. Kane's injuries were severe, and he lost consciousness during the rescue. When he woke up, he lay in a military hospital bed on New Geneva Station. Admiral Peter Collins sat in a chair beside Kane's bed. The Admiral was a large man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been fighting the Zephyrians since the war began. "Dr. Kane," the Admiral said when Kane opened his eyes. "I am sorry for your loss. The Mercy was a good ship doing important work." Kane tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. A nurse gave him water, and he managed to ask, "How many survived?" 153 people, Collins replied, "out of 2,047 souls aboard." The number hit Kane like a physical blow. Nearly 2,000 people had died, including Amy and all those children. Kane closed his eyes and tried to process the magnitude of the loss. "The Zephyrians claim your ship was carrying weapons," Collins continued. "They say they had to destroy it for military reasons." Kane's eyes snapped open. "That is a lie. We had no weapons. We were a hospital ship protected under galactic law." "I know," Collins said quietly, "but their propaganda machine is already spreading the story. Many neutral species are starting to believe them." Kane learned that War Marshal Thazavar had personally ordered the attack. Intelligence reports suggested it was meant to break human morale and show that Zephyrians would not respect any treaties or agreements. The attack had violated every law of war. "I want to offer you something," Collins said after Kane had time to absorb the news. "We are forming a new medical defense division. Your experience with alien physiology could help us protect our remaining hospital ships and medical facilities." Kane stared at the ceiling. The gentle doctor who had dedicated his life to healing was gone, burned away with the HMS Mercy. And his place was something harder, colder, and filled with a quiet rage that surprised him. "I want to think about it," Kane said. Collins nodded and left Kane alone with his thoughts. Over the following days, Kane watched news reports about the attack. The Zephyrian propaganda was working. Some species began questioning whether humans could be trusted. The galaxy was forgetting that it was the Zephyrians who had committed an act of mass murder. Kane made his decision on the day. They held a memorial service for the victims of the HMS Mercy. As he stood before a wall bearing 1,047 names, including Amy's, he felt something fundamental change inside him. The oath to do no harm had served him well in peacetime, but this was war. Kane accepted Admiral Collins's offer 3 weeks after the memorial service. The new position put him in charge of the Federation's Bioweapons Defense Division, housed in a secure facility on Luna Base. His official mission was to develop countermeasures against potential alien biological attacks on human colonies. Dr. Helen Carter greeted Kane on his first day at the underground laboratory. She was a brilliant scientist who had worked on genetic research before the war. Her team of 12 researchers had been studying alien biology for defensive purposes, but they lacked someone with Kane's extensive experience treating different species. "Welcome to Project SHIELD," Carter said, as she showed Kane through the gleaming white corridors. "We have been waiting for someone with your knowledge of alien physiology." Kane toured the facilities, noting the advanced equipment and extensive biological samples. The laboratory had specimens from dozens of alien species, including complete genetic profiles of Zephyrian biology. Kane's years of treating wounded Zephyrians had given him insights that no other human possessed. Colonel Jake Morrison handled the military aspects of their research. He was a strategic planner who understood how biological weapons might be used in warfare. Morrison explained that their primary concern was defending against Zephyrian bioattacks on human settlements. "Intelligence suggests they are developing something nasty," Morrison told Kane during their first meeting. "We need to be ready with vaccines and treatments if they release it." Kane spent his first month reviewing all available data on Zephyrian biology. He studied their genetic structure, immune systems, and cellular functions. The information was comprehensive, gathered from medical treatments, captured prisoners, and battlefield analysis over 3 years of war. As Kane worked, he began to see patterns that others had missed. Zephyrian DNA contained unique markers that made them vulnerable to specific types of genetic manipulation. Their advanced healing abilities, which made them difficult to kill in battle, also created weaknesses that could be exploited. Kane started his real work in a private laboratory that only he could access. Using his security clearance, he diverted resources and equipment to this hidden project. He told Carter and Morrison that he was developing broad-spectrum antiviral treatments, which was technically true. The virus Kane created was elegant in its simplicity. He designed it to target specific Zephyrian genetic sequences while leaving other species unaffected. The pathogen would appear harmless initially, spreading quietly through their population before activating its deadly payload. Kane called his creation Hippocrates' Revenge. The name felt appropriate for a healing oath perverted into an instrument of species-wide destruction. The virus would rewrite Zephyrian DNA, causing their enhanced healing abilities to turn against them. Their own bodies would slowly destroy themselves from within. Carter began to notice that Kane's research had shifted focus, but he carefully managed the information she could access. When she asked about his progress, Kane showed her legitimate, defensive research while keeping his true work hidden. He had become skilled at deception, a talent he never thought he would need. "Your antiviral compounds are impressive," Carter said during one of their weekly meetings, "but I notice you are spending a lot of time in the restricted laboratory. What exactly are you working on there?" "Advanced pathogen analysis," Kane replied smoothly. "Some of the Zephyrian samples require special containment procedures." Kane's transformation was not just scientific but personal. The gentle doctor who had once saved enemy soldiers now spent his days planning their extinction. He felt no guilt about this change, only a cold satisfaction that justice would finally be served. Morrison provided Kane with intelligence about Zephyrian military movements and population centers. The colonel believed this information would help Kane develop better defensive strategies, not realizing he was helping plan an attack that would dwarf anything the war had seen. Kane worked 18 hours a day, driven by memories of Amy's death and the screaming children aboard the HMS Mercy. Every calculation brought him closer to his goal. The virus was almost ready, but he needed a delivery system that would spread it throughout the Zephyrian Empire. The opportunity came when Morrison mentioned upcoming peace negotiations. A Zephyrian diplomatic mission would arrive at Neutral, Station Alpha, to discuss prisoner exchanges. Kane saw this as the perfect chance to introduce his creation into their population. Kane refined the virus until it could spread through touch, breath, and even the electromagnetic fields that Zephyrians used for long-distance communication. Once released, it would move through their military and civilian populations like wildfire. Within months, the entire Zephyrian Empire would face extinction. Carter expressed concerns about Kane's behavior during their final meeting before the peace negotiations. "Marcus, you seem different since you arrived here. The trauma from the Mercy must have affected you more than you realize." Kane looked at his colleague with cold eyes. "The attack on the Mercy taught me that mercy is weakness in a universe that shows humans none. We must be willing to do whatever is necessary to protect our species." Carter stepped back, disturbed by the change in Kane's voice and manner. "That does not sound like the doctor who saved thousands of lives regardless of their species." "That doctor died with the HMS Mercy," Kane replied. "What stands before you now is what the galaxy created when it decided to murder healers and children." Kane finalized his preparations as the peace talks approached. Soon, Ambassador Kelly Smith would unknowingly carry his gift to the Zephyrian delegation. The species that had destroyed a hospital ship and killed nearly 2,000 innocent souls would learn what it meant to face a human who had abandoned mercy in favor of justice. The gentle healer was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. Kane had transformed himself into humanity's ultimate weapon, and the Zephyrian Empire would be his first target. The galaxy that had forgotten the sanctity of hospital ships would remember why showing mercy to humans was not weakness, but wisdom. Ambassador Kelly Smith arrived at Neutral Station Alpha with no knowledge of the microscopic weapon she carried. Kane had exposed her to Hippocrates' revenge 3 days earlier during a routine medical briefing about alien diseases. The virus lay dormant in her system, waiting for contact with Zephyrian biology to activate its deadly programming. Kane watched the peace negotiations through security feeds from his laboratory on Luna Base. The diplomatic station hosted representatives from 12 species, all hoping to end the brutal war between humans and Zephyrians. Kane felt nothing but contempt for their naive hopes of peace. War Marshal Thazavar led the Zephyrian delegation himself, arriving with 40 military advisors and diplomatic staff. Kane studied the alien commander's face on the screen, memorizing the features of the being who had ordered the destruction of the HMS Mercy. Soon, Thazavar would understand the price of murdering healers. The prisoner exchange began on the second day of negotiations. Smith personally oversaw the transfer of captured Zephyrian soldiers, following protocol by conducting brief medical examinations of each prisoner. Kane smiled as he watched her touch the alien's skin, not knowing she was delivering death with every contact. Dr. Carter entered Kane's laboratory as he monitored the proceedings. "The negotiations seem to be going well," she said, reviewing data on her tablet. "Maybe this war can finally end." "Perhaps," Kane replied, not taking his eyes off the screens. "Though I suspect the Zephyrians have their own plans for peace." Carter noticed the biological monitoring equipment that Kane had focused on the diplomatic station. "Why are you tracking Zephyrian life signs during peace talks? That seems unnecessary for our defensive research." Kane turned to face her with the cold expression that had become his trademark. "I am monitoring for potential biological weapons. The Zephyrians cannot be trusted, especially during negotiations." The truth was more complex. Kane's equipment tracked the spread of his virus through the Zephyrian delegation. Within hours of Smith's contact, 12 aliens showed the earliest signs of infection. The pathogen was spreading exactly as he had designed. Thazavar himself became infected on the third day when Smith shook his hand during a formal ceremony. Kane watched the moment with satisfaction, knowing that the war marshal who had ordered the hospital ship's destruction now carried his own death sentence. The negotiations concluded successfully, with both sides agreeing to limited prisoner exchanges and medical aid for wounded soldiers. Kane found the irony perfect. The Zephyrians agreed to respect hospital ships and medical personnel, just as they unknowingly carried a plague back to their empire. Kane's virus had a 3-week incubation period, designed to ensure maximum spread, before symptoms appeared. During this time, infected Zephyrians would feel perfectly healthy while spreading the pathogen to everyone they encountered. By the time the first cases became apparent, millions would already be infected. Dr. Carter grew increasingly suspicious of Kane's behavior as the weeks passed. She noticed discrepancies in his research reports and questioned his need for certain genetic samples. When she tried to access his private laboratory, she found the security locks had been changed. "Marcus, I need to know what you are really working on," Carter confronted him 3 weeks after the peace talks. "Your research has moved far beyond defensive measures." Kane realized he could no longer hide his true purpose from his colleague. "I am working on a solution to the Zephyrian problem, a permanent solution that will ensure they never again attack human medical facilities." Carter's face went pale as she understood the implications. "You created a weapon, a biological weapon targeted at their entire species." "I created justice," Kane replied calmly. "The Zephyrians chose to murder healers and children. Now they will face the consequences of that choice." The first reports of the mysterious illness reached human intelligence networks 4 weeks after the peace talks. Zephyrian military units across 3-star systems reported soldiers falling ill with an unknown disease. Their medical teams found no cause and no cure for the rapidly spreading sickness. Kane watched the reports with scientific interest, rather than emotion. His virus was performing exactly as predicted, targeting Zephyrian genetic markers while leaving other species unaffected. The pathogen spread through their electromagnetic communication networks, reaching even isolated outposts and deep space fleets. Thosvar himself became symptomatic during a major military conference on the Zephyrian homeworld. The war marshal collapsed while giving a speech about expanding the war effort. Within days, his entire command staff showed signs of the same illness. The Zephyrian medical establishment worked desperately to understand the plague affecting their people. Their advanced technology, capable of healing almost any injury or disease, proved useless against Kane's creation. The virus attacked their enhanced healing abilities, turning their greatest strength into fatal weakness. Carter attempted to contact Federation medical authorities about Kane's weapon, but he had anticipated this possibility. Using his security clearance, Kane classified her concerns as potential intelligence leaks. Morrison supported Kane's decision, believing that any biological research must remain secret during wartime. Panic spread through the Zephyrian Empire as the death toll climbed into the millions. Entire fleets became incapacitated as their crews succumbed to the mysterious illness. Colonies that had stood for centuries suddenly faced extinction as their populations died. Kane felt no remorse as he watched the species that had destroyed the HMS Mercy face their own destruction. He thought of Amy Ross and the 18 children who had died in the attack. This was justice for their murders, delivered by the very healing knowledge the Zephyrians had sought to destroy. The Zephyrian government issued desperate pleas for medical assistance from other species, but Kane's virus was too advanced for any alien medical technology to counter. He had designed it using human genetic research that surpassed anything in the galaxy. Carter made one final attempt to reach the man Kane had once been. "Marcus, this is genocide. You have doomed an entire species for the actions of their military leaders." Kane looked at her with eyes that held no warmth or compassion. "They made their choice when they fired on a hospital ship. I am simply showing them the consequences of declaring war on human mercy." The galaxy began to understand that something unprecedented was happening to the Zephyrian Empire. An entire species was dying and no one knew why. The Crystalline Consortium was the first to understand what humanity had become. Their scientists analyzed tissue samples from dead Zephyrians and discovered the artificial nature of the plague. The virus showed clear signs of genetic engineering, created by a species with advanced biological knowledge. Chancellor Vextar of the consortium called an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council. Representatives from 47 species gathered on Nexus Prime to discuss the threat that humanity now posed to every living being in the galaxy. The gentle species that had once treated their enemies in hospital ships had revealed a capacity for total extinction. Kane watched the emergency session through intercepted communications. The alien leaders spoke of humanity with fear and revulsion, describing them as a plague species capable of destroying entire civilizations. He felt satisfaction rather than concern at their terror. Admiral Collins arrived at Luna Base to confront Kane personally. Intelligence reports had confirmed that the Zephyrian plague originated from human biological research. The Admiral's investigation led directly to Kane's laboratory and his work on defensive countermeasures. "Dr. Kane, or should I say, architect of genocide," Collins said as he entered the secure facility with armed guards. "Do you understand what you have done?" Kane faced the Admiral without fear or shame. "I have eliminated the species that chose to murder healers and children. The Zephyrians made their choice when they attacked the HMS Mercy." Collins studied Kane's face and saw no trace of the gentle doctor who had once saved enemy soldiers. "You have triggered a galactic crisis. 47 species are demanding humanity be quarantined or destroyed. They see us as an existential threat to all life." The Void Hunters, ancient enemies of the Crystalline Consortium, agreed to an unprecedented alliance. Both species recognized that humanity's biological weapons could target any genetic marker. If humans could destroy the mighty Zephyrian Empire with a single virus, no species in the galaxy was safe. Kane learned of the forming coalition through military intelligence. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations were uniting against humanity, setting aside centuries of conflict to face what they saw as a greater threat. Quarantine fleets moved toward human space, while diplomatic channels burned with accusations. Dr. Carter had been arrested for attempting to warn galactic authorities about Kane's weapon. She sat in a military detention facility, charged with treason for revealing classified research. Kane felt no sympathy for her fate, considering her naive belief that mercy should extend to species that showed humans none. Captain Sandra Bell commanded the rebuilt hospital ship HMS Hope, successor to the destroyed Mercy. She requested permission to visit Kane on Luna Base, hoping to reach whatever remained of the healer she had once known. Admiral Collins granted her request, believing that someone from Kane's past might influence him. Bell found Kane in his laboratory, surrounded by biological samples and genetic analysis equipment. The man who had once dedicated his life to healing. All species now worked on weapons designed for extinction. She barely recognized the cold, calculating figure before her. "Marcus, I knew Amy Ross," Bell said quietly. "She would be horrified by what you have become." Kane paused in his work and looked at Bell with eyes that held no warmth. "Amy died because we showed mercy to species that consider mercy weakness. The galaxy has taught me that compassion is a luxury humanity cannot afford." Bell tried to reach the doctor who had once treated enemy soldiers with the same care he gave to humans. "You took an oath to do no harm. You saved Zephyrian lives during the war." "I saved lives that would later take human lives," Kane replied. "Every Zephyrian soldier I healed went back to kill more of our people. My mercy enabled their continued aggression." The conversation revealed the depth of Kane's transformation. He spoke of evolutionary necessity and species survival, abandoning the ethical principles that had once guided his life. The gentle healer had become something far more dangerous than any conventional weapon. Kane established the Department of Xenological Security with approval from desperate Federation leaders. As galactic isolation threatened human survival, politicians embraced his promise of protection through biological deterrence. Kane's new organization began developing targeted pathogens for every known alien species. The Zephyrian Empire continued its collapse as Kane's virus spread through their remaining populations. Homeworlds that had stood for millennia became graveyards. The species that had seemed invincible in conventional warfare faced extinction from an enemy they could not fight. Other species watched the Zephyrian destruction with growing horror. If humanity could engineer the extinction of their greatest military threat, what hope did smaller civilizations have? The galaxy began to view humans not as fellow sapient beings, but as a fundamental threat to life itself. Kane received intelligence. Reports about new alien species making contact at the galaxy's edge. Advanced civilizations from distant star clusters were beginning to explore local space. He immediately ordered his team to begin developing preventive measures against these potential threats. "Sir, we know nothing about their biology or intentions," Dr. Susan Lee protested during a staff meeting. "Should we not attempt communication first?" Kane's response revealed how completely he had abandoned his former principles. First contact with any alien species represents a potential threat to human survival. We must be prepared to neutralize that threat before it can materialize. The Department of Xenological Security expanded rapidly as Kane recruited scientists willing to abandon ethical concerns for species survival. His laboratory became a factory for biological weapons, each one designed to target specific alien genetic markers. Admiral Collins made one final attempt to reason with Kane. "The quarantine. Fleets will reach our borders in 6 months. If we release any more biological weapons, they will consider it an act of war against all life." Kane showed no concern for the approaching crisis. Let them come. By the time they reach human space, we will have weapons capable of destroying every species in their coalition. They will learn that threatening humanity carries a terrible price. The gentle doctor who had once embodied humanity's best qualities had become its most terrifying weapon. Kane stood before his laboratory computers, planning the potential extinction of dozens of species. The galaxy that had chosen to murder healers would discover what happened when humans abandoned mercy in favor of survival. The last Zephyrian died on their homeworld of Zefkar, alone in the ruins of a once mighty civilization. Kane watched through long-range sensors as the planet that had spawned humanity's greatest enemy became a silent tomb. Billions of beings had perished from his creation, their advanced healing abilities turned into instruments of their own destruction. The Galactic Council declared humanity a rogue species and authorized military action to contain the biological threat. 53 civilizations contributed ships to the largest fleet ever assembled. They surrounded human space with a blockade designed to prevent the spread of what they called the Deathmakers. Kane felt no fear as the alien armadas approached Federation borders. His Department of Xenological Security had spent months developing weapons targeted at every species in the coalition. Each pathogen was designed to exploit specific genetic weaknesses that Kane had identified through years of medical research. Federation. President Robert Kim visited Kane's expanded facility beneath Luna Base. The politician looked uncomfortable as he toured laboratories filled with biological weapons capable of ending entire civilizations. Kane's work had made humanity the most feared species in the galaxy. "Dr. Kane, the Council has issued an ultimatum," Kim said as they stood before a wall displaying genetic maps of 47 alien species. "They demand we surrender you for trial and destroy all biological weapons research." Kane turned from his work with the cold expression that had become his trademark. "They demand we voluntarily disarm while they prepare to destroy us. This proves that showing weakness invites aggression." The president tried to reason with Kane about the consequences of continued escalation. "If we use biological weapons against the coalition, we risk galactic war on an unprecedented scale. Entire star systems could be depopulated. Then they should not have chosen to threaten humanity," Kane replied. "Every species that joins this coalition demonstrates hostile intent toward our survival. They must face the consequences of that choice." Captain Sandra Bell made one final attempt to reach the man Kane had once been. She brought images from the HMS Hope, showing alien refugees receiving medical care alongside human patients. The new hospital ship maintained the traditions of healing that Kane had once embodied. "Marcus, look at what we can be," Bell pleaded, showing him pictures of former enemies working together. "This is the legacy Amy would have wanted, not the extinction of entire species." Kane studied the images with clinical detachment. "Those aliens smile and accept our help now because they fear our biological weapons. Fear creates the respect that mercy never achieved." Bell realized that the gentle healer was truly gone, replaced by something that viewed compassion as strategic weakness. Kane had become humanity's ultimate expression of survival instinct, stripped of moral limitations that he now considered evolutionary disadvantages. The coalition fleet reached Federation borders and demanded Kane's surrender. Admiral Collins prepared defensive measures while hoping for a diplomatic solution. Kane took control of military communications and delivered humanity's response personally. "To the species that dare threaten human survival," Kane's voice echoed across space. "You have seen what happened to the Zephyrians who chose to attack our healers. Any hostile action against human space will trigger the release of biological agents designed specifically for your species." The alien fleet commanders received detailed biological analyses of their own genetics, proving that Kane possessed weapons capable of targeting each of their civilizations. The psychological impact was devastating, as species that had never feared disease suddenly faced the possibility of extinction. Kane's threat worked exactly as he had calculated. The coalition fleet withdrew to safe distance while their leaders debated whether to risk everything in an attack on human space. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations found themselves paralyzed by fear of a single human scientist. The Department of Xenological Security became humanity's primary defense organization. Kane recruited thousands of scientists willing to develop biological weapons for species protection. His motto, inscribed above the main laboratory entrance, read, "First, do no harm to humanity." Reports arrived of new alien civilizations making contact at the galaxy's edge. The Architect Collective and the Singing Stones represented advanced species with technologies that could threaten human interests. Kane immediately ordered the development of preventive biological measures against these potential enemies. "We must strike first," Kane explained to his research staff. "Waiting for these species to demonstrate hostile intent gives them time to develop countermeasures against our weapons." Dr. Carter was released from prison and offered a position in Kane's organization. She refused, horrified by what her former colleague had become. "You are not protecting humanity," she told Kane during their final meeting. "You are making us into monsters that the galaxy has every right to fear." Kane showed no emotion at her rejection. "The galaxy feared us long before I created my weapons. The destruction of the HMS Mercy proved that aliens view human compassion as weakness to be exploited. I have simply removed that weakness." The Federation government formally recognized Kane as Director of Galactic Security, giving him authority over all biological research and development. Politicians who once criticized his methods now supported him as alien threats multiplied. Kane had become indispensable to human survival. Kane established research stations throughout human space, each one dedicated to studying and countering alien biology. His network of laboratories worked constantly to maintain humanity's biological supremacy. No species in the galaxy could feel safe while Kane continued his work. The memorial wall honoring victims of the HMS Mercy became Kane's private shrine. He visited the 1-847 names daily, touching Amy Ross's nameplate while planning new weapons against alien threats. The gentle doctor who had once saved lives had become the galaxy's most feared architect of death. "Forgive me, Amy," Kane whispered during one of his visits. "Not for what I have done, but for what I have become." The transformation was complete. The healer who had once treated all beings equally now viewed every non-human as a potential threat, to be neutralized. Kane had become humanity's ultimate weapon, ensuring that no species would ever again dare to strike at human mercy. The galaxy trembled before the Deathmaker, the human who had abandoned healing in favor of extinction. Kane stood at the center of his biological empire, ready to defend humanity against any threat, real or imagined. The gentle doctor was gone forever, replaced by something far more terrible and effective. In the end, the galaxy got exactly what it had created when it chose to murder healers and children. Kane was humanity's answer to alien aggression, proof that even the most compassionate species could become absolutely ruthless when pushed beyond their limits.